All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming to this event. Our panelists, thank you so much for making this possible. And for our participants, thank you for coming. I hope we all benefit from this. Marquita, tell us a little bit about yourself before we start. And Hannah, tell us a little bit about yourself too. We know we all know you, but
Oh, hi. Marquita Norman. I'm at UT Southwestern Medical Center, emergency medicine, obviously. I'm associate chair of health equity, quality, and safety here. And happy to be joining. I apparently had registered. I was like, let me, I looked and said, oh, it's 7 o'clock. Let me log in. So,
excellent.
and it's great to see so many familiar faces.
Yes, indeed. It's great to see you again.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I just actually graduated med school last month. And I'm applying to EM this cycle. So just really waiting for match, but really excited to be here and to learn from all of you. So thank you so much for putting on this event.
So our event today is called Microaggressions No Longer Silent. All right, so I'm going to introduce to you our really wonderful panelists for today. So the first panelist I'm going to introduce is Dr. Cortland Brown. Dr. Cortland Brown is, I'm so sorry, is an assistant professor of emergency medicine at AAEM Health Carolinas in Charlotte, North Carolina. She is her department's vice director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Brown has been involved with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives from early on in her career. She has completed a medical research fellowship on this topic and received prestigious awards for upholding the ideals of diversity, equity, and inclusion. In addition to local leadership, Dr. Brown holds several national leadership roles, including chair-elect for the American Academy of Emergency Medicine Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion National Section, as well as section editor for the Western Journal of Emergency Medicine. Her research related to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has been published in journals such as JAMA Internal Medicine, Annals of Emergency Medicine, and Academic Emergency Medicine. So please join me in giving a virtual warm round of applause for Dr. Cortland Brown. Our second panelist that I'm going to introduce is Dr. Afrah Ali. She is an assistant professor of emergency medicine at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. She graduated from an emergency medicine residency at University of Mississippi Medical Center, after which she completed a clinical simulation fellowship at the University of Maryland Medical Center. Her areas of interest include simulation education, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, critical care, psychiatric, and dermatologic emergencies. Dr. Ali conducts research in the field of simulation and has been the recipient of the prestigious Young Investigator Award from the American Heart Association Resuscitation Science. She has spoken at national and international educational conferences on topics including life-threatening rashes, psychiatric emergencies, and simulation, as well as a recent talk at the 2020 Fem and EM conference. So we're very lucky to have her here today. And thank you for joining us. And then our third panelist, who we're also very lucky to have today, is Dr. Vonzella Bryant. She's an assistant professor of emergency medicine and assistant dean of student affairs at the Boston University School of Medicine. She is the director of undergraduate education in the emergency department at Boston Medical Center. Dr. Bryant has a passion for and has given multiple national lectures on increasing diversity in the field of medicine and advocating for healthcare equity. She has served as a liaison for AAEM's Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Residency Committee for the recruitment of underrepresented interns in medicine. She has led and facilitated microaggression bystander training workshops at regional and national EM conferences. Because of her work being on the front lines of the coronavirus pandemic, she has earned a spot in the US News and World Report list of hospital heroes with Drs. Fauci and Gupta, and selected to be a Celtics Hero Among Us and Hero of the Match for the New England Revolution. She is the Vice President of Operations of New England Medical Association, an affiliate of the National Medical Association, which serves as a collective voice of Black physicians in the New England area. So thank you so much, Dr. Vonzella Bryant, for joining us today. And we're going to give a warm round of applause for all of our wonderful panelists. Thank you for making this possible.
Thank you.
And we've got two new participants here, Kristen and Huda, welcome. I just introduced the panelists, but could you tell us a little bit about yourselves? Because we have a small group, it'd be nice to know a little bit about everyone.
Hi, this is Kristen Fontes. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. And then my camera's off. I'm homesick right now, but yeah, so I'm very excited to be here. I'm an emergency physician out in the Los Angeles area. I'm pretty involved with JEDI. I'm one of the people in charge of the mentorship webinar series that we've been getting off the ground over the last year. So I am definitely very invested in this particular subject matter, and I'm just thrilled to be here to witness this discussion. So thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Huda Naeem. I am an ER physician here in Texas. And it's very nice to have this this group that is addressing concerns of minority and the kind of issues that we have to deal with on a daily basis that doesn't seem like a big deal for a lot of people, but people who go through it really do know what they're talking about. So I'm excited to be part of this, and I appreciate you guys for organizing this for us.
We're happy to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
All right. So I'd like to start off by asking any one of our panelists to define what a microaggression is and to briefly discuss what forms microaggressions can take in our day-to-day lives.
All right. Well, gosh, doggone it. There is a good definition by this Dr. Gerald Sue as far as like there are any slights or like these ways that there's trauma, these micro traumas. I mean, there's macro, but micro traumas that make people feel othered, and it can be in the form of racism, but then also sexism or gender identity, or even more ableism and ageism. There's just a whole bunch of isms. So when we try to address microaggressions, that when Huda was talking, I was like, yep, death by 1,000 paper cuts, because you just kind of bleed till you're just done. You're just like burnt out, and which I did have that experience when I was working at my other institution, where there was just so many microaggressions, not just from my colleagues, but from patients. And yeah, it's something that really can affect your workability, your way of being more productive, and I just said increasing your rates of burnout, but then and also depression and anger too. So now, those are what my things on microaggressions. I'm interested in what our other panelists would say.
Thank you for that wonderful definition. And if anyone has anything to add to that, that feel free to chime into. If not, don't worry, we have a lot of questions. So. All right.
I just wanted to add a little bit to what she said initially. The other thing I'm thinking, like, I think at times when you are thinking about asking for a raise, when you're thinking about asking for the next step in your career, making a career move, for some reason in back of your mind, you're already thinking like, do I really deserve this? Do I because you've faced it so many times over and over and over that you don't have the confidence that a person who doesn't have to deal with this has. So that does play a role, and it's somehow, there's a reason a lot of minorities are not up there on the leadership ladder because of these little things that do hold us back subconsciously.
Yep, the imposter phenomenon is like, it's real, and I liked some of the readings I had was that it's not just you have to change yourself, but the environment has to change for us to help imposter phenomenon for people of underrepresented groups.
I love that you called it imposter phenomenon also, because most of the time people say imposter syndrome, which implies that it's something wrong with the person. And it is not anything wrong with the person. It is something wrong with the structure and everybody else that's working within that structure. And so I think we really need to change the narrative there. So anytime anybody says imposter syndrome, I'll kind of just make that little correction, because I think it changes the mindset. It's not a me problem.
Yep.
I kind of want to add in a different perspective. So I was born in Saudi Arabia and grew up in Dubai majority of my life, and then moved to the US 8 years ago now. And Dubai is a very multicultural environment, but I was very hyper aware of the color of my skin the moment I landed here. It started at the airport with the immigration officer's questions, and I thought, okay, this is just doing their job and it's going to end. Unfortunately, it never ended. It went from like these massive, obvious, very bad events that were so intense that made me so depressed and anxious to go to work, to these subtle comments. I never realized, oh, these are microaggressions. There's a reason why I'm so upset about this. So I'm really glad that now we have a platform where we can talk about these things openly.
I agree. I'm really sorry to hear about bad experiences.
No,
It
but I
does-
hear that from my colleagues who are like from the Caribbeans or from Africa, and they're like, yeah, I never really thought about race until they came to the United States, and then they were like, oh, now I'm experiencing racism. So yeah, welcome to America. I ain't going nowhere. My people build this country.
Dr. Ali, actually, I do have a question for you, and it's about responding to microaggressions, which can be very tricky. The person who is perpetuating the microaggression can get defensive or discredit you or make you doubt yourself. Could you share a time you responded to a microaggression and the response that you received in that situation?
So I must tell you, initially, the first year while I was here, I just kept my mouth shut for anything. So anyone could tell me anything. And I was so shocked that this happened to me that I wouldn't say anything. Whether it was an intense event where someone tried to pull off my hijab, to someone calling me a terrorist, to someone telling me to go back to my country, then the Muslim ban, like it was just like nonstop, right? So initially I would never respond to anything. But now as an attending, I think I have the confidence to say something back. Recently, I was named on a list that was supposed to be honorable for me, and they misspelled my name. I contacted the organizers and I, very casually told them, you misspelled my name and this is the correct spelling of my name. I was given the runaround, multiple excuses of like, oh, we're investigating it. We don't think it is you. They called my place of work to verify my address and my name. At the end of it, I was so frustrated with it, like 10 days passed and I was so frustrated. I contacted the leadership and I sent them a very strong worded email about what is name-based microaggressions and how, as a woman of color who has deserved to be on this list, you're just discrediting me by not even spelling my name correctly. I was very upset about it. And the response I got was, again, not what I expected, but the media person did apologize to me and they did try and make a feature of my name and made sure they made all the corrections. I just felt that it was an honor and they shouldn't have made me go through all these like polls to get my name published correctly.
No, I completely agree. That's egregious. And I'm glad you were able to get it looked at. But yeah, that's a tricky position to be put in. And actually, this question is kind of for everyone, but should we feel pressure to respond to every microaggression that we encounter? And what are some of the thoughts that run through your mind when deciding if you want to respond to an incident?
I can go. So usually the way I think about it is, do I feel safe in this scenario? Is it a patient, a peer, or a colleague, depending on who it is? What is the circumstances? Obviously, if it's a patient that has a psych history, is unstable, is not somebody who is able to have a coherent conversation with you, then I usually don't engage in that aspect and I'll take care of the medical aspect first. But if it is a situation where the patient is stable and I can think for a minute, I check in with my own emotions. If I'm too scared to say something, I don't say anything because it's not safe for me to say something. Or if I'm upset or angry, again, I check my own emotions first. And then once I think I'm at a better place, I will go ahead and address it at that point.
I think that's such a good answer. I wish that's what I did. That's not what I do. I kind of use two things, number one is, do I think I can actually make a difference in this scenario, or am I just wasting my time preaching to somebody who's not at all listening? Because I mean, microaggressions, like by definition, they are small, like those little paper cuts, and they happen all the time.
Yeah.
And so we can't respond to every single one. And so, you got to kind of pick your battles, unfortunately, otherwise you're going to get so burnt out. And, in the end, me being in the position that I'm in does matter, seeing biracial women in these positions does matter. And so I kind of try and judge the situation on, do I actually think I can, open anybody's mind? And it doesn't even have to be the person that did the microaggression. It can be somebody that witnessed it. It can be one of my colleagues that I later tell them about how I managed it. And then honestly, the other thing I think about is, what is my emotional reserve at that time? And that's because I need to protect myself. If I don't feel like I have the capacity to handle it at the time, I'll let it slide. And then, I may go back, reflect on it and be like, actually, I'm still thinking about that. Let me go back and address that individual. Or let me just chat about it and get my feelings out with somebody else. So I really, I try and protect others that are around me, protect myself. And then if I think it's something that, this is somebody that individuals that are junior to me are going to keep interacting with, and it's going to affect them, then it's also something that even if my emotional reserve isn't, at its best, I will try and stand up and correct it so that future generations aren't dealing with the same thing.
Yeah, I did all the things that Dr. Brown said, and I just want to make sure to point out what Dr. Brown put in the chat, because I tried to copy and paste that, and I can't from the chat. But I think that those are some great tools there, as far as having scripts or what to do.
Dr. Brown, could you tell us a little bit more about it? Just like talk us through your strategy.
Yeah,
Definitely. So I actually don't use these because I'm not like I'm kind of just a say what I'm feeling type of person. But I think having these scripts, exactly like Dr. Bryan said, they're scripts. I think they can be really helpful for individuals, especially if you're not sure how to handle the situation. And so one of them is, if you're a bystander, you can use the tool that's called Open the Front Door. So O stands for observe.
Okay.
And you usually say like, I noticed, or I saw, some very like welcoming statement like that. And then you give a factual description. And then the is for T, I think. So what you actually think about it. So I felt this way. And then F is feel. So getting a little bit more into your emotions. And then D or door is for desire. So what's the actual outcome that you want from it? Because oftentimes we're like, do better. Like, don't say this thing, don't call me a nurse. And then it's like, okay, what actually, like, what's kind of the end goal of that? And so just to be very specific with what the desire is. Another one is if you're the recipient of a microaggression, so you can use the tool action. A is for ask clarifying questions to assist with understanding intentions. And so that's like I want to make sure I understand what you were saying. Were you saying that? And oftentimes that can just prompt the conversation, because you're kind of putting that in, like you're kind of calling them out without calling them out. You're kind of giving them an out to be like, oh no, I didn't actually mean that. Like, oh, that wasn't okay what I said. Let me like internally reflect on it. And then C is, coming from a point of curiosity and not judgment, which is hard. T is tell what you witnessed in a very factual manner, which is also hard. I is impact exploration, and that's kind of like the feel in the Open the Front Door. So like you can either ask or state what the possible impact was. And so one of the things is, what do you think people think whenever they hear that type of comment? Or, what do you think that message sends based on what you said? O is then owning your own thoughts and feelings. And then N again is the next steps. And that's where you kind of request those specific actionable changes.
And Dr. Brown, is that listed somewhere? Because I wasn't able to copy and paste those, and I want to keep those somewhere.
I gave it it's from a talk that I gave a while ago.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember where I found it, but I will send it to everybody after this.
Okay,
I'll send the slides to everybody after.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing those. I think it helps to have like kind of a script in those situations. Dr. Bryant, I know that you became known for using the lifts or like creating the lift strategy. Could you tell us what that consists of and just like talk us through that as well? The more tools we have, the better, honestly.
Yes, of which I feel like is just so similar to what Dr. Brown has, as far as the L is for lights on, and where you could say something like, just like Dr. Brown had in her script. I'm just surprised that you said that. Just kind of, I noticed in one of my colleagues said, that you're being mad, passive aggressive, right? And hey, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes to be able to get people to kind of highlight what had happened. But then I and lift is for the impact versus intent, like that, where are you from? Know where you really from, and the idea that you make me feel as if, even though you may be just curious, it really makes me feel like you think I'm like not from this country, or that I don't belong in this country, because you didn't do that with Mike over there. And then the F is for full stop. If somebody has like, I don't want to be taken care of by that Muslim person, or what? Nope. Nope, we don't like that kind of talk here, full stop. No, we're not going to tolerate that. Even though, like Dr. Brown was saying, as far as your comfort zone, but then the feeling is if you do have to protect somebody sooner than later, full stop when it comes to that. And then the T is for teach. And with that, well, anybody ever hear someone call somebody a sickler? A patient with sickle cell disease, and it's just like, that makes us feel as if sickle cell patients are just, that they're just their disease, and that they're not an actual person behind that who's actually going through real pain. So just as far as teaching around it, so that's the left tool.
Doctors Brown and Bryant, thank you so much for sharing all of those. I think they're all really helpful, and I'm writing them down. There's another one Dr. Brown has, assist. Let's see. I like this. Wait, can you talk us through this one too?
Definitely. So this is if you actually are the one that did the microaggression. And so it's assist. So A is for acknowledging the biases. So we all have our own biases. I have a very big gender bias, which is surprising because I like to think that I'm very like pro women, but I apparently am not. And so just acknowledging that. S is for seeking feedback. So as soon as you're aware that somebody experienced a microaggression from you, just learn about what happened from them. And that also comes with the caveat that, it's not their role to teach you. That's part of the minority tax. It's not my job to teach somebody how to not be racist. It's their job to learn on their own, and I can help them if they're receptive and if I feel like it. But it can be helpful just to seek that feedback. The next is saying you're sorry. So that honestly doesn't happen very frequently. And I think we try and intellectualize everything and kind of talk about it at these very high levels, but sometimes you just need to acknowledge that what you said was wrong and very hurtful, and just say, I'm sorry. And then the I is for the impact, not intent. And so we frequently get very defensive and are like, oh, I didn't mean it that way. But that's not what's important in that moment. And so in that point, you really just need to acknowledge the impact. And then the next S is for saying thank you. And again, this goes to, it's not the person, it's not the role of the recipient of the microaggression to teach you. They're the one that's reliving the trauma. They're the one that's going through this. And so if they are helping you learn what you did and learn from it, they are doing something that's, nice out of the kindness of their heart. And so I think we frequently forget to be like, thank you so much. I know I just made you relive that, or I know that wasn't your role to teach me that, but I really appreciate you doing it. Yeah,
I love it, because I was talking about this today with my students as far as the the over sorry, like, no, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. It's like, okay, maybe once, twice. But when you do it over and over again, it just gets weird. It's like, okay, now you're making me feel weird. And to tell you, I do that too. So I always have to stop myself. All right, say you're sorry. Maybe, like you said, state how you kind of understand the impact of what you said. But you got to just go move on, because then it gets weird.
I'm so glad. I just want to add, I'm so glad you guys touched on that too, because we often, we do hear about microaggressions, but sometimes we overlook the fact that what if we are the one causing it, if we are the one doing it, like what are we supposed to, how do we handle that? Like we have done it and we don't realize we did it. And then we find out that, oh my gosh, like I didn't mean to, but now how do I backtrack? How do I fix that? So I'm so glad you guys shared that assist thing. Thank you.
100%, I agree. And I like that the impact, not intent. Like, oh, I didn't mean this. I feel like that would come out accidentally. So it's good to have something to remind me, no, that's not what you say. All right. So Dr. Bryant, actually, this question is for you. So whether we're the marginalized group or the allies that want to support them, most of us, well, I'm so sorry. I already said this one. I'm so sorry. Dr. Brown, I do have a question for you. So residents are particularly vulnerable to microaggressions, given their position and being particularly susceptible to their negative impact, given that they're building their identities as physicians during their training period. What advice do you have for those looking to support their minority residents when they experience micro or macroaggressions? I know you already gave us a bunch of tools, but I was wondering if there was anything specific. And then actually, question for everyone, does anyone work with residents here? I think a lot of you do, right? Okay, yeah. So it's relevant to everyone.
I think so. I'll answer that two different ways. I'll answer it as the attending that's trying to support my residents. Actually, I'll give a broad answer first. So I think the biggest thing whenever you are from the majority group, like we, especially if we consider ourselves advocates, we frequently want to step in and be like, that wasn't right. Don't talk to my resident that way. And I think the first thing that you need to do is just take a step back and actually check in with that resident and be like, hey, I noticed that. I don't think that was okay. I wanted to see how I can support you. Because I know frequently as a resident, I went to a program that was basically everybody was an advocate. It was an incredibly warm, welcoming program, and anybody would stand up for you. Anybody would fight for you if they felt like anybody was slighted in the smallest way. But I always, as a resident, was like, I can actually stand up for myself. I don't need you you standing up for me actually kind of makes me feel smaller. And so I think as an attending or even as a co-resident, the biggest thing is to check in with that person and just offer them different ways. Do you want me to speak to the patient directly? Do you want me to be there when you speak to the patient? Do you want to just not acknowledge this and just pretend like it didn't happen? Do you want to file a formal complaint? As an attending, knowing the structure that you're working under and knowing the institutional tools that you have is also super helpful. Do you want me to file a care event? Do you want me to email whoever? Just knowing everything that you have is how I kind of answer that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's, I like how you take a moment to ask them how you would want to support them. I really like that.
I just wanted to add, being the resident who has had attendings like Dr. Brown who have checked in, I think it's very great to have that, because they kind of sit you down, give you a minute to yourself so that you can collect your emotions and see where you are. Because I think whenever you don't check your emotions, you may go say something that you regret later on, or may turn out to be a very non-productive conversation. So I'm really appreciative of having that kind of environment around myself as well.
Like that point of view. And then Dr. Bryant mentioned this kind of earlier about how microaggressions, a lot of them can lead to burnout. So I guess this question is kind of difficult, but how do you prevent them from making you bitter and burned out and negatively affecting us? Is there anything that we can do?
Well, hopefully you can find good support from your program if you're a resident, from your program directors, and hopefully your program can develop. And we just developed this where residents can report any types of disrespect or trauma or any type of thing. It can be anonymous or whatnot, but hopefully your program can have a portal like that. And for me, when I was in the community, where actually I didn't have any colleagues of color, yeah, that was hard. So I think but now I'm at a new institution where, and I used to maybe go to church, but still, if you don't have anybody in the medical field that could really understand. So I guess even if I was in the community, hopefully you can find some allies or even groups like my New England Medical Association, which is the NMA affiliate, find those groups to be able to validate that some of these things that you've gone through, you're not crazy for thinking that those were microaggressions or insults to you. And actually my group, we have a white coat trauma and racism. I think that's it. I maybe messed up the title, but we have a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, in our group, and she does a really great exercise where we have one person to talk about whatever microaggression or trauma that they had, and then we turn everyone else turns their camera off. The person who gave their trauma turns off their camera, and then the rest of us talk about, what we thought about that. And it's just really it feels like you're just really validating that was a trauma, but then also validating, kind of feeling empowered about next steps. But I think finding your people, finding tribes, people to talk to will help decrease your burnout. Therapy is also great too. I was like, Marquita's love it.
I love all of that. I would add another tangible thing that I did, especially as a resident, because I mean, there's going to be those days where you leave shift and you're like, all my patients yelled at me. Every single person, asked me to get them a urinal. Everybody's questioning all my orders. The consultants or a trauma comes in and everybody's looking at the tall white guy. So I actually, and this is just a logistical or a tangible thing, I kept an Evernote or notes, whatever app you want to use, of all the positive evals that my attendings gave me. And then sometimes I would literally just read through it. And any negative eval, I would read it in MedHub or whatever we used, and I would process it, and then it would be gone. But my positive evals, every single one I copied over. And then I also copied over positive moments that I had with patients. And obviously you want to make sure that you're protecting, HIPAA and PHI. But if I had a patient that told me about their family, I just write that down. Didn't have anything medical, but it's just it's those moments that, why you got into medicine. So whatever that is for you, just finding ways to remind yourself of that.
I'm gonna be really quick. This is how crazy Dr. Bryant is. I even would have patients who are you're a great doctor, a fantastic doctor. Oh, I'm gonna keep a small little person of you in my pocket for whenever somebody makes me feel bad. I'll be like, she said I'm a great doctor. Thank you. And put them back in my pocket. But it's so true. Remember some of the positive things.
I think a key word that Dr. Bryant mentioned is validating your feelings. A lot of the times you isolate yourself because you don't think people will understand what you're going through, especially if you're the only person of color in that room. So I think for me, initially I did isolate myself, and then I realized that there are people willing to listen what I may be going through. And maybe they're not in my shoes, but they will understand. And once I shared that with my colleagues and my peers, I think a lot of people were validating my feelings, what I was feeling that time. And that made me feel much, much better. And I think that's what you need. You need validation. And now at this position as being it as an attending, when I see something else happen like this, I usually, try to ask the residents what's going on and how did they feel after the event, try to validate their experience. And I think just be open about mine and how my initial experience caused me anxiety. I wasn't strong enough to go say something to anybody. I was quiet. And it's totally okay to do that if that's what you want to do. I think telling people that it's okay to be yourself and do what you want to do, like you have to give people sometimes the right to feel like themselves and be authentic, because it's just so hard with what we do to do that for ourselves.
I think that's so true about validating. I mean, honestly, this conversation right now is like giving me so much energy. And I'm like, it's just us like just chatting, but I'm like knowing other people are going through similar things and just sharing our experiences. I'm like, I'm ready. Like I can do this. Like I'm ready to take things on.
100% agree with everyone. Okay, this is out of curiosity for anyone. So from what quarter do most of the microaggressions at your workplace come from? And which ones have the biggest impact on yourself and on patient care, do you think?
Is it nurses? I don't know. I mean, even when I was in residency, and that was a long time ago, I graduated in 2003. You had in your group Golden Boys, that's what we call them, the Golden Boys. And like Dr. Brown said, like the tall white guy who, sounds so confident in everything, like obviously this and obviously that. And so the nurses, of course, they love them and whatnot. And so, yeah, I think it was, who was it that said, maybe Dr. Brown or Dr. Ali said that, the questioning of your orders. And to tell you the truth, even as an attending, it got weird, like where I just noticed that they always still question. I think it was when I changed institutions and I was new and they thought I was so young, and I was just like, okay. They thought I'm almost 50 years old, but okay, cool. but yeah, but now that with the pandemic and you had the great resignation and people leaving and then people coming and now my nurses are kind of like, oh, I know you though. And so now they're kind of being like more like cool and friendly with me. But I tell you the truth, yeah, that's where I got most of my microaggressions. Yeah. And the nursing is changing too, because a lot of those nurses left too, and now is a chance to help diversify the nursing staff. So it's feeling a lot better.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that, if that's okay. I was gonna share that, when I was a resident, and even now too, especially when I wear my hijab out in public, I get stared down sometimes, and especially like patients come up to me and be like, I don't want you as my doctor. I've been told if you ain't white, you ain't right. Things like that. But when your patients say that, it's one thing, because you are in that position where you have to take care of them and they are your responsibility. So it is one thing that I can kind of process in my head and put my emotions on the side, be like, no, I have to be the bigger person here because I'm making sure they are safe, they're okay, they're healthy. But when your colleagues start making comments like, and it's on microaggression topic, on that topic, I would mention recently, a couple of weeks ago, one of my colleagues, I shared with them that I'm going for a medical trip to Guatemala, which I was hoping he was going to talk about the culture there, how you're liking it, or the medicine you're practicing there, the clinic part of it. The first question he asked me is like, oh, so you wear hijab, don't they look at you differently when you walk in with them and with the hijab on? That was like, I'm just curious, I just want to know. And I was like, out of all the questions he could have asked me about this trip, that's the first thing you picked on. And he's like, so the people you go there, do they look at you differently because you don't look like them? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my colleague asking me these questions, a highly educated person. Like, how do you respond to that? And it's just, I'm like, ask me about my work, ask me about my passion, ask me about those questions, not my appearances or how I look. So it's one of those things. It's just, you kind of start, I think it's kind of starts affecting you on a, it's like a slighter scale, but it just starts adding up that, hey, there's more to me than just what meets the eye. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I just realized that I called Dr. Norman Marquita, and I was like, oh, and what was your last name? Huda? Uh-oh,
My last name is Naeem, Naeem, Naeem.
Naeem, Dr. Naeem, thank you. I want to be consistent. Thank you. Thank you.
I apologize too to all the participants. I think I called everyone by their first name.
Because like one thing I noticed though in some talks, if everyone agrees to go by first names, that's what we can do, and we could have set it up that way. And I'm sorry, I didn't think about that until just now. But then when I noticed that I did the doctor thing, then the first name, I was like, oh, yes. But I found that was a nice thing. Like if we're gonna if you could set it up at the beginning that everybody's going to go by first name, so that you can like work against that man, what they call a mantle, when it's all men and like one female on the panel, and it's like pretty much a mantle. and so that's how you can fight against that.
I also just love what you just did, because it kind of goes to the point where like we all will make mistakes, and how do we address it? And I think just being very open there and kind of, you did exactly what we talked about, as that person, how they feel, what they would like. And then we kind of just had a conversation from it. So I actually think that was a beautiful example of how to handle a situation.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. If everyone's okay with doing one more. Okay. So what do you guys think? Do you think over time in a certain workplace, do you experience less microaggressions over time because people get more familiar with you and they know more about you? Or do people get more relaxed and are less careful with how they talk to you? What have you guys found?
Gosh, it's a good question. I mean, my shotgun answer is I think they start to know me better. And that's the thing. I mean, as far as the studies on why increasing diversity is going to help healthcare overall, is because if there's more, people, diverse people working, then everybody starts to decrease their bias and assuming this and assuming that about folks. And so I'm hoping that that's what we're going to see in the future with the diversity that I'm hoping that we'll have in the future. But that was a shotgun answer. What do you think?
I don't know my answer to that. I think it kind of just changes. Like, I feel like whenever you're new, it's a little bit more indirect because people aren't sure, like they're trying to like feel you out. They might say something to somebody else and then it'll get back to you, or it might just not be as overt. And then whenever they get to know you, and I guess it depends on also who you are and like how you interact with people and the vibes that you give off, and just who you are in that situation. But I feel like with me, it's just become a little bit more direct. Just like you said, people feel like they can like joke around a little bit more, and sometimes those jokes cross the line. But yeah, I don't know.
What I've noticed, I think with time, it has gotten better because I think they know me more personally. They know how I am as a person, but I've also worked at making sure I keep that boundaries where people still, at work, call me Dr. Ali and use my last name in front of patients. Outside work, when I hang out with somebody from staff, that's totally fine to call me by my first name or anything else. But in the patient environment, there has to be a level of professionalism. And because I've set that boundary with like everybody, I've been grateful for having that. I think definitely I think once people got to know me better and seeing how I was, it did get much, much better. But I felt like I also had to make a lot of effort to get over those biases they had about me. Like it just felt like I had to put way too much effort than the other people had to.
I would just add a little, if that's okay. So in my experience, I've noticed both ways actually. And it really, for me, it really depends on the person who is, who I'm dealing with and their personality. So there have been times where people, over time, they do joke a lot more. But at that time, when they're joking, at that time, it's more of they have already accepted me as one of their own. So now their joke is not like, it's not hurtful jokes. It's like, oh yeah, you're one of our buddies, and this is what we're saying. Oh, not the one who's not white, but but at the same time, it's like not an offensive joke. It's more like, okay, yeah, we know, like, you're one of us. And then as far as what Dr. Ali was just saying, I struggled with that a lot. During residency, I told everybody, hey, my name is Huda, and I was going by first name. And then they started talking in front of patients and called me like Dr. Huda. And I was like, no, it's Dr. Name. In front of patients, it's Dr. Name. And I had to correct them so many times. So it kind of got really frustrating for me and annoying for me to keep correcting them. So what I started doing after that I just introduced myself as Naeem. So I just tell everyone, like, it doesn't matter if you call me doctor or not, just call me Naeem. So that way, at least there is some kind of boundary that we are creating. So they don't think it's okay in front of patient to just go and call me doctor, call me Huda, because that's just not professional at all. So even if they call me Naeem in front of patient, I'm okay with that, because at least that is not my first name. So that's how I introduce myself to my staff, like Naeem, just call me Naeem. That's how that's the solution I came up with.
Thank you for sharing that. I've noticed when I first started at my place, I was only introducing myself as Dr. Tirabishi, but recently some nurses I've never said my first name to anyone. I was really careful about that. Some nurses recently started like calling me by my first name. And I like immediately shut it down, because during residency, I never got anyone to call me doctor anything the whole 3 years. They even put it in their documentation. So yeah. Yeah. So like, I don't know. It's interesting that you guys have had experiences both ways. I'm really interested to hear that.
I'm a huge fan of boundaries. And I think that and I think that as long as you create those boundaries, you have earned that degree, you have earned that title, and it is okay. I have a mentor who she's family medicine. Like, this is like my first mentor. Worked in a practice with her father, and everybody saw her grow up. She had no problem correcting patients who would be like, oh, by her first name, be like, it's Dr. such and such. I mean, she said it so quick. It was, but you shut it down. So I'm a huge fan of boundaries. And when I introduce myself, I usually say the full name. So, I seem like to me, it seems weird to be like, oh, hi, I'm Dr. Norman, unless it's a patient situation. But I say, hi, my name is Marquita Norman, and give the whole name. That way, the assumption is you either go call me by the full name or we not. Yeah. But huge fan of boundaries.
I like that.
Go ahead.
Oh, the thing that I actually experience in my shop. So I trained in California, very, very, very informal. And now I'm in the South, very formal. And so I actually have an incredibly hard time getting my colleagues, nurses, residents, co-attendings to call me my first name. And so, everybody here is Dr. Brown, and it actually makes me feel older. So I don't like Dr. Brown except to my patients. And so I think an important point is, don't obviously go with Dr. Blank first, but then if somebody corrects you, listen to them. Because it's very annoying that I have to constantly keep telling people, no, call me Cortland. And they think they're being respectful because they're saying Dr. Brown. I'm like, no, it's actually not, because it's not what I want. So I think an important point is just to if somebody corrects you, do whatever they're doing or do whatever they tell you to do.
I had similar experience in residency. My first name was very difficult for a lot of people to pronounce, and they were not very familiar with my last name. So my initials on the board were AAA. So everyone would just call me AAA for the longest time. And that's what I got stuck with. And I thought it was kind of cute because, AAA, I used to tell people how dangerous I am. Things like that. And I made it a joke. But yeah, I never heard my name for the longest time because I was living by myself and the only people I talked to were from work. So that did affect me in my own ways. And when I started as an attending, I started making sure I put my pronunciation of my name correctly. So people actually use my first name correctly. And I will not hesitate anymore to tell them how to pronounce my first name. And if they're not comfortable doing it, like a lot of people still just call me Ali. Like even if my own co-attendings will call me Ali, some of them are more comfortable using my first name, but some, I guess, just don't want to try, don't care. But I try to correct people and just, just like Marquita mentioned, the moment it comes out, the moment you correct it, or else it just sticks with you and you just gotta roll.
I like the thought of like putting, because your name is like, you wouldn't think it's like literally 2 syllables. I mean, you wouldn't think it'd be hard, but I like just helping people along, like putting some, like the way that you pronounce it might be helpful.
Yeah, my entire name is Afrah Abdul Wahid Ali, and I had to legally change my name once I moved to the States because it was becoming a huge issue from so many aspects. So now I shortened it. It's Afrah Ali now officially, but when I moved, it was a whole thing.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for doing this event. And thank you for sharing like all the personal stuff that like makes it more, I think, relevant and helpful to us. Does anyone have anything else they want to add before we end the event?
Shall I give you my email, Dr. Brown, so you can give me those things? I'll put my email in the chat. I definitely want to have those things.
I just want to say thank you to all of you for, having this space, and just also for, sharing your experiences and the insights that come from them. I know it comes from a very vulnerable place, and I can certainly relate to, some of the things that, were brought up. And so I just want to say I appreciate that this conversation happened, and hopefully we have more like it. And then also, and I think especially the thing that resonates with me so much is something Cortland said, which is about, really understanding like what your emotional state and reserve is for dealing with microaggressions. Like it really took me a long time to even just like be mindful of that, and so I think that's like such an important thing to remember. Like, I think we focus so much on, just sort of like coping in the moment. And I think for me, it was also like realizing like, oh, this is going to take systemic change for this to really get better. And that's like a very, that's a hard place to live in your head when you think about how hard it's going to be and how much time it's going to take for that to actually happen. So yeah, the self-care aspect of it, I think is really important for people to hear. So yes, thank you, all of you. This is a great discussion.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And thank you, Cortland, for putting it in, because I'm tired. I still did Dr. Brown, and she just literally said, call me Cortland. And I was like, Dr. Brown, so I'm sorry. I'm so tired. But this is fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so